I don't know if you know this, and you probably don't want to know this, but it's actually easier than you might think to be mistaken. Mistaken about anything. I was reading through the week about an experiment with a mouse. There are two mouse-sized rooms, room A and room B. In room A, there is a small electric shock. It's unpleasant. In room B, there is no shock. Can you remember that? Room A, a shock. Room B, there's not. They worked out that the mouse, and this is very clever, they've worked out that the mouse stores memories of room A in one part of its little brain and memories of room B in another part of its little mouse brain. And they know, and they can tell with an MRI machine, which area of the brain is storing which room. Got that? So, and I know this sounds a bit mean, and I'm not endorsing it, but scientists have found that if they put the mouse in room A and give it a shock, at exactly the same time they stimulate the room B part of its memory with a pulse of blue light, that mouse will forever be mistaken about which room is safe and which room is dangerous. It will forever associate room B with the shock, take it to the safe room, room B, any time after that, and its little mousy muscles will tense up and it'll be in fear, waiting to be shocked. The mouse, you see, is mistaken. And all it takes is a tiny pulse of blue light at just the wrong time, and it will be mistaken forever. Now, I don't know what you've ever been mistaken about, probably nothing. You know, you may well be the kind of person who has never admitted a mistake. But the reality is, all of us get things wrong all the time, and it doesn't take very much. The human mind is an incredibly complex and wonderful kind of filing cabinet for holding and organising all kinds of information, but all it takes is the tiniest glitch and we can get the wrong thing in the wrong place. You can be mistaken because popular opinion says something and you just assume it's right without ever checking it out. You can be mistaken because you've decided an issue before you've looked at all the evidence. You are convinced that tomatoes are vegetables because you didn't realise it's actually a berry with edible seeds, which makes it a fruit. You're mistaken. Like it or not, there are all kinds of ways that we can be mistaken. But particularly, I want to say, when it comes to the question which I think is the biggest one of all, and that's the question, who is Jesus and what did he come to do? It may be, you see, that you are mistaken about Jesus. It may be that you have put Jesus in the wrong mental box, that your categories are wrong, that you've maybe limited him in your own understanding to being something less than he really is, to being something he's not. And so in this little series, I'm going to be looking at 5 ways that our world has done that. That has pretty much toned Jesus down to be just a prophet, or to be just a preacher of peace and tolerance, or a religionist, which is a convenient word I just made up, if he's interested in how religious you are. Or this morning, mistaking Jesus for a therapist who's just come to make us feel better. The American preacher Tim Keller says that a survey of religious beliefs in America shows that most Americans live by what he calls a moralistic, therapeutic deism. In other words, a made-up religion that says Jesus just wants to be my therapist and make me feel better. That says I'll be moral, so he'll bless me. I'll be moral, so he'll prosper me, he'll give me straight teeth, he'll heal me when I need it. It's his job to meet my needs, and the rest of the time I'll just ignore him. Now, there are churches that grow on exactly that principle. I drove past a church not so long ago that had a huge banner on the outside saying, healing guaranteed every Sunday. Which is maybe how a bunch of people are seeing it here in Matthew chapter 8 and 9, because there is an astonishing array of healings and other miracles going on. And there's an ever-growing crowd. Did you see it? Growing and growing and growing. Jesus is there, and there are people coming to him from everywhere. A leper saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. A centurion saying, Lord, my servant lies at home paralysed and in terrible pain. There's Peter's mother-in-law lying desperately ill in bed with a fever. And every time, did you notice, Jesus heals them? Either with a word for the centurion's servant without even going there, or with a touch for the unclean leper and the feverish mother-in-law. And so when evening comes, it's no surprise, I guess, that word is spreading that there's a healer in town. Now, I don't know, you get to an age and stage in life, don't you, when this stuff is suddenly very interesting, isn't it? There's a new physiotherapist in Baden maybe, and word gets out, he's really good with back pain. And word spreads like wildfire, and suddenly there's a queue of cars around the block, you just can't get an appointment. Or the guy with the new treatment for cancer on Today Tonight, and it's all around the internet. Now here is Jesus, you see, he's at Peter's house. He has just touched the hand of Peter's mother-in-law, and the fever has left her, and she's up waiting on him in her apron. It's remarkable. Word spreads, why wouldn't it? And now all kinds of people are there outside the house. And when evening came, verse 16 in chapter 8, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out spirits with a word, and he healed all the sick. Which might make you think that that's what he's here for. Certainly draws a crowd if that's what he wants. Hundreds screaming for attention, wanting relief. And yet, do you notice in verse 18 a very strange thing? When Jesus sees that twilight crowd getting bigger and bigger and bigger, he gives orders to the disciples to get in the boat and head to the other side of the lake. He says, we're out of here. Which is kind of odd if Jesus came to be a healer. Plenty of healing action, popular. And yet he says, let's go. Now maybe if you think that Jesus came to be our therapist, Jesus came to make us comfortable, if Jesus came just to fix stuff like that, you have to consider the fact that if you think that's what Jesus came for, you may have been mistaken. You see, in the end, it's only a warm-up act for something far bigger, which you get a hint of if you back up just a verse, Matthew 8, verse 17, if you want to read along. And it tags a verse from the Old Testament that we need to think about for a moment. Matthew says, this was to fulfil what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and carried our diseases. Now, it's Isaiah 53, verse 4, famous Old Testament section. He there being the one that Isaiah calls the suffering servant, who would one day come, the one he calls the man of sorrows, yet much more than a man. Now, if you do what you should always do and go back and read those verses in Isaiah in context, read the verses around the verse, it's an interesting thing. Let me put a couple of verses on the screen, or at least Bob will if he clicks the button. Here's the bit Matthew quotes, Isaiah 54 verse 3, which says, 53 verse 3, surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Now that's what Matthew quotes. But now get the next bit. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him and afflicted, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed in that translation, for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Now do you get what he's saying? You see, there might be plenty of sick Israelites. Everywhere you look, skin diseases, fevers, demons driving people crazy. And Jesus gets that and he steps in and he touches it and he carries it and he takes it on board. But do you notice the real ailment of Israel, the real infirmities? They're in the second bit. It is their transgressions that he's coming to address. It is their iniquities that he's going to take on himself, which are, of course, just fancy words for their sinfulness, their guilt before God. Now, I'm not sure we believe in sin anymore, as a culture. I'm not sure that we ever use words like transgression and iniquity anymore. Transgression, it means crossing the line from what's right to what's wrong. What do? We just wipe out the line, we take it away. We just redefine stuff so everything's okay as long as you don't affect me. Sure, it might be a sin if someone backs into your car in the car park and doesn't leave a note to say who they are. But somehow it's not so wrong if you do it, is it? After all, it's so expensive. Leave your number, you'll have to pay money. They've got insurance, drive away. Same with lies, cheating, promise breaking. Just do whatever suits. And sexuality, whose business is that? Just do whatever you like. Now you see, that was Israel as well. God said to them, you have crossed the line over and over and over again. There will be hell to pay. Call yourselves my people and do that. And yet he says, I will send you my servant who will touch all your uncleanness without becoming unclean himself, who will take on all your mess without becoming messed up himself, and then will be pierced for your transgressions. They will nail him for our arrogance and lies and deceptions and perversions and pretensions. Him pierced for your transgressions, crushed for your iniquities. When this suffering servant comes, says Isaiah, taking up your sicknesses will just be the start. That's just the small stuff. The big one is he's going to deal with your sin, which, if you've had to spend most of your life in a wheelchair or you can find to bed, or if you've got a chronic condition you really want fixed, may not be exactly what you wanted to hear. Like the guy on the mat at the start of chapter 9. Remember him? Have a look there. Jesus has been across the other side on the boat. He's calmed the storm with a word on his way there. He's gone straight past two demon-possessed guys who were so vicious no one else could ever pass by. Everyone was in fear, just driven out the demons with a word. And now he's back home again in chapter 9, and some guys bring him a quadriplegic on a mat. A guy who can't walk, can't move, totally dependent on his friends. And when Jesus sees how much those friends are trusting him, when he sees how they're relying on him to do something great, when he sees their confidence that he can do more than they can even imagine, when Jesus saw their faith, verse 2, he says to the guy on the mat, take heart, great news, cheer up, son, your sins are forgiven. To which the guy's maybe thinking to himself, yeah, great, paralysed, I can't even do most of the sins I probably want to. Can't even move. What's the point of that? But can you see, for Jesus at least, this is priority number one. This is the main thing. Now, where is it on your priority list? Because sin is real. You can't imagine it away. You can't define it away. Look at yourself. For Jesus, a solution to that sin problem is what he is living for, and it is what he will be dying for. That's what he's going to be pierced for, pinned up on the cross. He's not there to fix a guy's muscles so he can walk for a few years before he's crippled again by arthritis and old age, like all of us will be. That's not his primary job. It's to win his eternity. Now, the teachers of the law get angry when they hear what Jesus says, son, your sins are forgiven. They always do, the religious guys, don't they? Who does he think he is saying that? Saying your sins are forgiven, talking as if he's God, blaspheming. At which point Jesus, knowing exactly what they're thinking, says, well, let me demonstrate. Which is easier to say, verse 5. Your sins are forgiven, or get up and walk. Well, of course, it's much easier to say your sins are forgiven because nobody is going to see anything different, are they? A little smile maybe, a look of relief that you're washed clean on the inside and the guilt's gone. Haven't got that hard look in your eyes anymore. You might see those little things, but it is hard to test, isn't it? And it is a hard thing to do in the end. It's going to be very costly for Jesus. But saying get up and walk, well, it is harder to say that and be convincing, isn't it, for you or me? Because, you see, if I said it, nothing at all is going to happen and it's going to be very embarrassing. But Jesus says to the crippled guy, just so they know he means business, just so they know it's not cheap talk, just so they know that he can do the other thing, forgiving sins, he says to the guy, get up, take your mat, go home. And he does. And the crowd is filled with awe and amazement, as they would be. That's exactly the right way to be when you're face to face with Jesus. Whether it's his teaching, when you look back to what they said at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, or when you're confronted by his raw power when he calms a storm with a word, or when you see him heal the sick and drive out demons. But surely even more so when it comes to the really hard thing of saying what only God can say and proving he has the authority to say it. Verse 8 says, when the crowd saw this, they were filled with awe and they praised God who had given such authority to men. But I wonder, are they only really impressed with the healing? Have they really put their minds to the fact that he is claiming to forgive sins? You see, the law teachers are right. It is blasphemous if it's not true. You come over to me and you say, oh, I backed into Wayne Fry's car in the car park. And I say to you, that's okay, I forgive you. It doesn't really work, does it? In fact, it's a little bit rude. How does Jesus get to say to this paralysed guy, the wrongs you've done in your heart, in your mind, in your life, I forgive you? Only God can say that. Now, you mightn't think about sin much, but the essence of what the Bible calls sin is ignoring God. It is living as if you yourself are the most important being in the universe, which is what we do. Quadriplegic or not, it's what we all do. Even though we're just tiny little specks on a tiny little planet in a huge universe that God made, we say we're the centre of it all. How does God feel about that? And yet now Jesus has proved that he has got the authority to forgive that kind of sin. And all the mess that flows from that kind of sin as you've made yourself the centre of everything and trodden on everyone else. Jesus is here to put things right with God with all the authority of God. He is going to be wounded for your transgressions as you read on in Matthew's Gospel and see him nailed on the cross. Crushed for your iniquities, if you want him to be. Which is a much, much bigger thing than being a good therapist. Except it is funny, isn't it? The queues seem much, much shorter. Even now, this morning, if you're new to church and you haven't worked through this stuff yet, and if I say to you, I can introduce you to someone who will forgive your sins, chances are, well, you'll have another agenda, won't you? And if you are interested in Jesus, maybe it's because you think there's something more in it for you. You know, people will queue for miles for a new iPhone. People will queue for half a block in the centre of the city for a new sushi restaurant at lunchtime. You'd maybe queue for days if someone said they could cure your cancer without chemo. And yet the bigger thing, the better thing is he has come to forgive sins. And he was pierced and he was crushed. And forgiveness is all yours for the asking. Now, if you haven't got that, if you haven't seen that yet, then maybe you see you've put Jesus in the wrong box. Maybe you are mistaking Jesus. You're missing the point. Can I suggest think it over, because this is great news. Think it over and then join the queue. You really only need to talk to Jesus in prayer, but if you want some help, you can talk to Stu or talk to me. If you want to get it sorted, sign up for Christianity Explored. Find out more there. Because this is square one in the Christian faith. This is first and foremost what Jesus came for. It's what we need most, whether you are thinking so or not. You know, if you're a mouse, all it takes is a little flash of blue light for you to be mistaken. If you're honest, maybe sometimes you and me can easily be mistaken too. But let's make every effort to get it right about Jesus.